In chapter 10 of section 3, we are going to be discussing one major aspect of ICT projects, that is information and communication for technology for development projects, and this is human capacity building. This perhaps, although it seems like a brief section, is as important as content development, because the choices of technology are always there. We can learn how to manage a project, but we really have to understand what human capacity building in a context of the new information society and in a context of information and communication technology for development is all about. To do this, I would like to introduce you to what I call the changing landscapes of literacy. Not more than 50 years ago, a person was considered literate if they could read, write, and perhaps write their own name in their own native language. This was a definition of functional literacy, and this is a definition of literacy in adult education that has really not changed much over 50 years. However, what has happened since the 1990s and what has happened with an increased research in the understanding of adult learning principles is that literacy is itself a multi-dimensional concept, and all of us, though we may be educated, have certain literacies and certain illiteracies. For instance, a person can be very highly educated but computer illiterate. Similarly, a person like a young child can be very familiar with computers and with mobile phones and be completely computer literate, but at the same time not have literacy in the traditional way that we understand it. Some other person may be illiterate of their cultural legacy. Some other person may be illiterate in a particular discipline. In terms of understanding literacy within the context of a new information society and within a context of information and communication for development, what is important to remember is not so much that each one of us has a certain illiteracy built into our lives, but a concept of what is known as information literacy. Information literacy, or the new literacies we are looking at, is not so much having learnt the knowledge and keeping it inside, but having the ability to source the information and to absorb it. For instance, alongside traditional alphabetic literacy, which is in this chart that I present before you at the bottom, that is being able to read, write one's own name and being able to read and speak also in their own native tongue and in another language. We also have other concepts. We have concepts of having computer literates. We need to be visually literate so that we can decipher symbols. We need to understand what different media are like. We need to understand how to source information from a library instruction system or a network library. So today's understanding of literacy is not merely about the traditional way of looking at reading, writing and arithmetic, but it is much more about making people information literate, making people able to source information and use it as they see fit for their immediate needs. And that is what the changing landscapes of literacy is all about. When we begin to look at ICTD, human capacity building, the first essential thing is to be able to use ICTs at all, people need to have computer literacy or basic ICT literacy, the ability to very simply navigate a computer or navigate a mobile phone is a must for everyone, particularly when services are being increasingly delivered online and where information is available online. And there are many interesting experiences worldwide which show how this literacy can be developed among all citizens, irrespective of their levels of wealth and irrespective of where they live and irrespective of their gender. While we look at basic ICT literacy for all, we also need to look at what we call developing specialist skills. Specialist skills means people with the skills required, whether in content development, whether in software applications, whether in developing content packages, whether in designing web pages, whether in writing source codes. So, we are talking about a skilled set within a pool of people who will then form the teams that will design ICTD interventions. These kind of specialist skills are for the knowledge economy, and they are for all those who are going to be looking at developing ICT interventions. For instance, when developing a website, as important as having a content developer, it is important to have a web developer and a web designer. These are specialist skills which not all of us possess. Some have more than others. At the same time, developing ICTD skills, which is understanding the situations and contexts and understanding how to apply ICTs for development, is the field of developing ICTD skills or human capacity. In this, there are two groups of people really that we have to address. Today, as an immediate urgency, one needs to address people in government, such as policy makers and decision makers, who need to understand not only the power of ICTs, but also people who have the power to mobilize top level support and commitment. They need to understand this whole field and the way in which ICTs can be used to meet development objectives. At the same time, one needs to address planners and project designers. These are middle level functionaries who design, cost and implement initiatives. Such functionaries include academics, IT specialists, technology designers, content experts and developers, among others. ICTD skills are also necessary for champions, that are key individuals who drive the process and volunteer as test cases to sell ideas to peers. Again, we also need to develop trainers of trainers, individuals responsible for the training of field level personnel and workers, so that in trickling down in a cascade model, going from trainers, master trainers to trainers, in turn they become champions, deeply committed, and also who in turn begin to develop larger and broader ICT skills within a community, within a context and the conditions in which the technologies are to be deployed and used. These will be the key persons whose training is part of a national ICTD capacity building activity. At the same time, while we are looking at the immediate requirements, it is necessary also to build for the future, or future proof, that is, develop a plan of action which will provide us with the requisite ICTD skills, not just in the present generation of leaders, but in the future, for the future leaders, the leaders of tomorrow, that is, our young people in higher education. There are only a couple of academic programs in the world in the field of ICTD, and these are in developed countries. The issue one of this primer is one effort to meet the gap between those few programs available and the large number of people, young people, who need to be exposed to the potentials of ICTs for development. And it is hoped that in the Asia Pacific region, where the demand for such people is the greatest, we should also be able to future proof our generations and future generations and to develop these capacities. The points here to remember is that human capacity building is an essential element of the effective use of ICTD. Skills required for different groups are different, but without building up of ICTD capabilities, the full benefits of technologies cannot be availed of. Developing and retaining skilled users is also essential for sustainable social and economic development. So, ICTD human capacity building therefore goes beyond just broad ICT literacy and ICT in education to creating a core set of competencies that today's leaders and future government leaders, academic, researchers and ICTD activists need to make the most of the potential of the technologies. Some people say that ICTD is the general responsibility of IT specialists and engineers. Others will argue that ICTD is the domain of the social scientists. In this practical exercise, I invite you to form two groups. One group will argue and debate the case for IT specialists. The other group argues for social scientists. At the end of a 30-minute debate, find and list at least 5 common aspects present in both arguments. Find the list of 5 differences. Synthesize them to form a common understanding of what ICTD capacity building should contain in your own national contexts. Share this with the rest of the class and see what you come up with.